Welcome, everyone, to Partner Up with Amy Carroll. As a communication coach, trainer, speaker, and author, I'm delighted to be your host and excited to bring you insights and ideas to help you solve your communication conundrums. This is the 7th episode of my show, Partner Up with Amy Carroll. If you want to find out more about me or what the show is about, feel free to listen to previous episodes either on my website, carrollcoaching.com, or the Voice America Business Channel, and be sure to download the app. Now, if you missed last week's show, I interviewed Robert Kahn, founder of the Leader Like You concept. Be sure to check it out on my website or your favorite podcast app. Today is a live show. That means you can connect with us directly. Today's topic is the power of humor and how it can positively impact relationships and results. Feel free to call in with your own success or disaster stories where humor either got you into or out of hot water. The number to call in with questions and comments is 1-866-472-5790. That's 1-866-472-5790. I am super happy to announce my guest today, Andrew Tarvin. Welcome, Drew.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Now, a little bit about Drew. He is a humor engineer and the CEO of Humor That Works, a leadership development company that teaches professionals how to use humor to achieve better business results. He has partnered with top organizations like IBM, the UN, and even the FBI to solve human challenges with humor solutions. Drew's a best-selling author, and he's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Fast Company, and was named a Visionary Under 40 by the Procter & Gamble Alumni Network. His TEDx talk is on the skill of humor and has been viewed for more than, 8 million times, only half of which were his mom. Yay for moms. He loves chocolate and tweeting puns. So, Drew, I think it's safe to say your passion is about humor and helping people to find and cultivate their own humor.
Yeah, that is a great assessment of what I love waking up and doing every single day.
I have to say I share this passion as well. And it's part of the reason I was so delighted that you agreed to join me today. And one of the things you and I started talking about is I remember when I was a kid, one of the things I would love to do was to sketch dresses, like big 18th century ball gown dresses. And I remember I can visually recall the sketch pad I had and be sitting in the living room doing this. And for some reason, one day at 8 years old, I had this thought, I can never do this as a profession because it's too fun. And I remember just being horrified by that thought. And I think you work with a lot of people who have sort of that concept of how work has to be a serious thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's an interesting thing that even at an early age, you learn this, what's really a misconception that our work can't be fun, that if there's something that you enjoy as a child, when you grow up, that goes away. And, I've certainly heard that in the past when talking about humor in the workplace. People are like, no, but, work is supposed to feel like work. Or people even told me, like work is, if work was meant to be fun, it would be called play. And I don't know. And maybe it's partially a change in terms of how we work. Maybe it's a generational thing. But for me, I've always kind of imagined like the average person will work 90,000 hours in their lifetime.
Extraordinary.
Right? Which is a lot of time. That is longer than everything that is on Netflix, Amy. That is a long time.
And Lord knows I have tried to get through that.
Exactly, right? And so it's like, all right, well, if we're going to do that work anyway, my thought is we might as well try to find ways to enjoy it. And what's crazy is that when we do find ways to enjoy our work, when we add a little bit of humor, not only do we enjoy our work more, but we actually get better results. And that's what I think is the best piece of it, is that it's a win-win both for you as a human and for the organization.
I wish you were around not only when I was 8, though, well, that would have been technically impossible, though at least 20 years ago when I started my business, because one of the things I did was I took a self-assessment around my values. And my top 2 values were fun and play. And I remember thinking, oh my God, how will I ever earn money if all I want to do is have fun and play? And luckily, I just kept that in the back of my mind and I didn't let it stop me. In fact,
Mhm.
it over the years when I remember one time a client said, they hired me again for a second gig. I said, well, listen, we're doing this in French. My French is really questionable. What makes you want to keep working with me? And she said, it's your energy. It's your fun. And I thought, oh, wow, that's fascinating. And I think maybe I might have a corner on the market working in, the Swiss culture, because there is a tendency to be a bit conservative in the way people express themselves. And so
Mhm.
that's one of the gifts I've learned that I bring to my clients is that fun and play.
Absolutely. Well, and it's interesting because from a corporate perspective, people would maybe say, I don't know about fun and play, but they've almost just given them different names. But maybe we don't want fun and play, but we want someone who's passionate about their work. We want someone who's engaged in what they do. We want a team player who builds strong relationships. It's like, well, fun and play help you get all of those things that you're saying that you're wanting. So why wouldn't you want them? So I think that's a
Yeah.
great piece, is that's stuck with you and that you've brought it back, because it can be weirdly a competitive advantage. It's almost sad. Like, I don't know. I've thought about this in the past because I, teach people how to use humor effectively in the workplace. And I love what I do and I'm happy that I'm able to do it. But in some ways, it's a little kind of disappointing that I even have a job that, like,
Yeah.
me telling people use humor, that they're like, what a novel idea. It's like, there's something kind of wrong with how we're raised if that's the case, but I'm happy to
Yeah.
at least maybe be changing the narrative.
Yeah. You and I are both from the world of improvisational theater and using these techniques to help people become better human beings. For listeners who aren't familiar with improv and using it in this way, in this non-performance mode, how would you describe improv, how it's used to listeners?
Sure. Well, I think it's a great question because, there is misconceptions around improv, because you tell people like, oh, I do improv. And sometimes the reaction is one of two things. It's either tell me a joke,
Right.
which is like, well, that's, not improv. That's a little bit more stand up. And even then getting put on the spot like that is a little bit weird. Or they say that the big thing that a lot of people say is like, oh, improv, I could never do that.
Yeah.
Right, because they have this conception that it's like, oh, you've got to be funny and you've got to completely wing it. And I don't
Yeah.
think of improvisation as winging it. I think of it as leveraging your experience and expertise and adapting to the present moment. And that is true in a performance setting. That is learning, taking your skill as an improviser and saying either funny lines or connecting as a character or building relationships with the scene partner, right? Partner up.
Yeah.
In a performance standpoint, or in real life, it is adapting and being present in the moment. And it's something that, we do every single day, right? You and I are improvising some of a conversation now. People who are listening right now are probably improvising a little bit on the road if they're listening while driving because a car comes over and they have to adapt. And so my thought is, if you already improvise, which we know you have to because your
Right.
life isn't scripted, you might as well learn some valuable techniques and get good at it, because you're going to do it anyway. And this applied piece, well, what we call applied improvisation, is just taking the concepts, ideas, and even some of the exercises from the world of improv and applying it to other situations like communication skills, leadership skills, building relationships, improving your own confidence, etc. So it's an application piece that I think people don't always realize is so valuable to improv.
Yeah, I like how you connect it with just everyday activities that we're improvising all the time. And I think people might be very conscious now with the reality of what COVID has caused us to have to do that. Oh, well, yeah, I'm improvising a lot more than I ever thought I would or could. I want to give a shout out to the network that we're a part of. So if anyone's curious to know more about this concept of applied improv, you can check out the website appliedimprovisation.network. And that's where you can just have a host of resources and amazingly talented professionals who can bring this work to your companies. So, Drew, I want to ask now specifically, you talked about improv in general. How has improv helped you?
Yeah, it's a great question, and a quick shout out to the network as well, as you mentioned, because there are so many of these applications of improvisation. So you have people like me and Amy who use it for kind of the corporate and communication and that kind of stuff, and then you have people who are using it with people who are suffering from dementia or kids with autism, or helping to, a friend of mine, did improv in Cyprus to try to help mend some relationships after civil war, right? Like there's all of
Wow.
these massive implications and value of improvisation, because there's a couple of things from improv that are really ultimately life skills. That's why one of my favorite books is called Improv Wisdom by Patricia Ryan Matson, because it's all about what are the applications that come from improv that we can apply to life. And for me, it's really helped in two ways. One is it's really helped me boost my confidence,
Mm.
because I'm a planner. I've always had a 5-year plan since I was like, I think 12 years old or something. I always like, and I'm a project manager by training. That's what I did at Procter and Gamble. I'm used to like creating the charts and having the specific schedule and all of that. And I was, in the past, I was confident when I had the set plan and
Right.
everything went according to plan. Right. Then I was confident because I knew what to expect and I had accounted for it. And you mentioned, like, especially in today's time, people have told me, that we've been working with one-on-one, have been like, if I had just known this was going to happen, I could have planned so much better. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, that's all of life. If we had all known that
Yeah,
this was
right.
going to go on and in this way, it would be a little bit different. So instead of basing your confidence on having the perfect plan and everything going perfectly to plan, what if you got more confident knowing that no matter what happens, you would be able to adapt? You would
Mm.
be able to, as we call from improvisation, yes and your way through the situation, right? Yes and is the fundamental mindset of improvisation. And that's where improv comes in. You get comfortable being in the uncomfortable, or you get comfortable being in the unknown, almost, in a sense. And that's what's really helped me boosting my confidence. And then even just that application of yes and, going back to that idea of, oh, you're going to work 90,000 hours in the workplace. Yes, and you might as well enjoy it. And that's kind of where the humor for me comes in, is that humor is almost a yes anding of our work. It's saying we're doing this anyway,
Mm.
so let's enjoy it. Let's have a little bit of fun.
Oh, nice connection. And for me, you might have said this though, sometimes for people, they're hearing that idea of yes, and it's the concept may feel unclear. The way I like to say it, and I think maybe Kat talks about it in her book this way, is anything is an offer.
Mm-hmm.
A person sitting next to you on the bus, a smile, a compliment, and then the flip side, a complaint.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we widen our scope, that the offers are all around us, and the game is to go with the flow of that. And that doesn't mean saying yes to everything. It can be uh, um, there's many ways to accept someone's offer, I think is what I want to say.
Yeah, well, and even like you said, pretty much everything can be an offer. And like you said, doesn't mean that you have to say yes to every single offer. And the
Right.
yes part of it is a little bit of a misnomer, because people think that it means that you're enthusiastic, or that you become a yes person,
Yeah.
that you have to say yes to everything. Because
Right.
even the pandemic, in a sense, is an offer. It doesn't mean that it's one that we're super happy about, but it is an offer in some ways. And so it becomes, okay, how do you end it? If this pandemic is already happening, how are you using it as an opportunity to, start to read a little bit more, to work on that one project that you always wanted to, or to even just connect more fully with your family,
Hmm.
right? Like, I have spent more time with my mom this year, because we did multiple trips to Ohio and stayed for a month or 2 weeks, or, extended periods of time. And we saw each other every single day, versus just going in for 1 day or 2 days when I would be traveling all over the place. And so again, it's not saying, hey, I'm so happy that there's a pandemic and, sorry for everyone else, but this is amazing. But it's more
Right.
of saying, okay, because this is already existing, that's the offer that does happen to take place. I'm saying yes, not that I love it, but yes, it's the reality.
Yeah.
And here's my action as part of that.
Yeah.
Here's how I'm going to react.
Yeah. A couple of things I said yes to at the start of the pandemic. I had about 7 to 10 days of sort of a little bit of freaking out. And then when I settled in, I'm like, okay, Amy, it's going to be going on for a couple months at least. Ha ha ha. What do you want to accomplish in these coming months that if you don't do it, you'll be disappointed with yourself? And so I
Mhm.
made a list, and some of the things I did was I Marie Kondoed my winter wardrobe. My sister Sheila is a Marie Kondo consultant, so I got her to coach me from Vancouver.
Mhm.
I hired a coach to work on my one woman show. Not sure when I'll be performing that. And I signed up for a course to teach trainings online. So I knew that, I would be like, had every advantage available. And, I was I stayed very productive and very happy, partly because of having that, saying, not trying to fight what was going on and just going with the flow and advancing it by building on that.
Yeah, which I think is a beautiful thing to be able to do, and to be able to look back. That future paced thinking is a great way to think about that. And in fact, that's like kind of how, like, when I left P&G to start my own company and do that full time, future paced thinking can sometimes help give you clarity on a decision, because it can feel very, very tough in that exact moment. But if you're like, okay, me looking back, what do I want to accomplish, I think is a valuable skill set. And you're seeing incredible things that people have done in this environment of, again, people connecting more closely with families, starting a new hobby, learning cooking, or again, even just saying, okay, this is my time to reset. Because I think that we also have to keep in mind that for some people, this isn't like, oh, I've got to learn 8,000 different things, and if I didn't, this was a waste of a pandemic. It's like, no, maybe it was just that you spend a little bit more time kind of with yourself or working on yourself.
Yeah. And the thing you said about connecting with family, there's 7 kids in my family. We're spread across the globe. And we have had Zoom birthday parties. We had a Zoom murder mystery, things we've never, ever done in the past. And we've still been, at this distance. So yeah, has been a really nice bonus. Drew, I want to talk about your book, which has the same title as your company, Humor That Works. And I want to dive into from your perspective, what are some of the specific benefits of humor?
Yeah, it's a great question, because again, the what's interesting is that this all comes from, me being an engineer, right? My background is I have a degree in computer science and engineering. And so my kind of foray into humor and using it was less about even this kind of yes ending and let's, have fun. It actually started because it was helping me get better results. Because as an engineer, it was this really valuable tool for solving problems. And the kind of real connecting moment of it happening was, I remember being in this meeting that was so boring. It was like one of those meetings where it's like so boring you want to like cry.
Oh gosh.
Like, that was boring. Like where you start daydreaming of all these other things you wish you could be doing instead of that meeting. And it's not
Including
even this. You're not
laundry.
exactly right. Yeah, you're not like, oh, I want to go skydiving. You're like, should I get a root canal right now so I feel something? What should happen? And the problem with this particular meeting was that I was the one leading the meeting. And I had this
Oh
realization where
God.
it was like, yeah,
Oh, true.
it's like, all right, if I'm bored while talking, they have to be bored while listening. And this was early on in my career at P&G. And so I had this existential crisis, because I was like, is this the rest of my life, right? I
We
just
sure.
went through school, et cetera. Is this the next 50 years of my life, is meetings and emails and meetings and emails, and I'm going to hate all of it? And I was talking with a good friend of mine, and this particular friend was the one who pushed me into improv, because I started doing improv in university because my best friend wanted to start a group. He needed people, forced me to join. So I was talking with him about this because he was going off to Chicago to study at Second City and everything, and I moved to Cincinnati to do this corporate job. And I was like, maybe I made the wrong decision. Maybe I should sleep on a couch somewhere and just do that. And he's like, listen, you love problems, which I do. I love solving problems. Like, I do Sudoku and Ken for fun. I don't think of them as math problems. I think of them as math opportunities.
Oh
Right.
boy.
I love solving problems. And he's like, consider this a problem to be solved. And I was like, interesting. How would I solve boredom as a problem? So I started to incorporate a little bit of humor, what I had learned from improvisation. I started to bring more humor into my presentations, adding images, telling stories, doing interactive exercises. And I realized it started getting better results. And as I started to see those better results, I started to do research on it, right? Because I'm an engineer. I'm like, is this a thing? And
Did
it
I just
turns
get
out,
lucky? Yeah.
exactly, yeah. Or is this just a weird scenario with this particular person or this particular team? And no, it turns out that there's over 30 benefits to using humor in the workplace, backed by research, case studies, real world examples. And they range from things like helping to improve connections, to building relationships, whether that is virtual or in person. It is about creating a more like positive workplace, creating a little bit of psychological safety. It's helping people be more authentic and more human. There are physiological benefits to laughing and smiling, like burning
Right.
calories or increasing your boosting your immune system, decreasing stress, relieving muscle tension, right? So there's all these incredible benefits to using humor that I was like, oh, this is just another strategic tool in my tool belt that I can start to apply in certain situations to get the results that I want.
Drew, when you were talking about all those benefits, you named another psychological safety, the connection, and there was another one. And it made me think of an NPR broadcast I heard just a couple of days ago where they say that laughter is a play signal and is meant to indicate to others that we have harmless intentions. So you can
Yeah.
imagine when you're meeting people, perhaps for the first time, when like I, I realize I must do this unconsciously. I immediately connect and I'm very playful with participants when they're first coming in the morning because I know they've heard about me. And they're like, "Oh my God, she's so, she doesn't look as scary as she's at, I've heard about her."
Mhm.
So I sometimes have this reputation being a really tough coach, no nonsense. And so immediately to build that rapport, I think that I have done that, use that as a strategy, not even knowing it consciously.
Yeah, well, it is like when you make someone laugh, or let's say you make me laugh, one is creating a positive moment, and I'm going to associate that positive moment with you. It's like, okay, this was a fun experience. And then I think at a subconscious level, or maybe even sometimes at a conscious level, I'm like, oh, well, you get me. Like you
Mm.
understand, you have enough at least empathy and understanding about me in some sense to have made me laugh,
Hmm.
right? You need a certain level to actually make that happen. And so I think that's why Victor Borg said, the shortest distance between two people is a smile.
Yeah.
It's that it kind of instant connection. Like you said, this is harmless intention. I'm not going to like hurt you or anything like that. So it is this positive way to build relationships. There's all of these different benefits to using humor that aren't just about, hey, let's all have fun, but more about, no, I'm doing this strategically.
Mm. And you have talked to me about the five core skills that
Mhm.
come, these benefits. Let's go into a deep dive into some of those.
Absolutely. So as an engineer, I love taking things apart and then putting them back together again and then seeing how they work. And, so I've done it with humor. I did it as a computer engineer. And I think if you take work apart and really trying to distill it down to its most basic skills, it's really kind of five core things that you do every single day, no matter who you are. And this we've learned and proven over time when we've worked with a wide range of people, as you mentioned, right? So groups like Microsoft and IBM, or international organizations like the UN or the Red Cross, or more serious organizations like the FBI, the US Navy, or even kind of interesting organizations like the International Association of Canine Professionals.
Oh, okay.
Which fantastic group of dog trainers. They're amazing.
Nice.
But the all of their work really comes down to these five core things. And so the first core skill of work is execute. You have to be able to execute a task, to be able to send an email, or enter data, or fry the French fries, or shave an alpaca, right? If you're an alpaca farmer,
Good point.
you have to be able to complete a task. Then you need to be able to think strategically, to solve problems as they come up, to figure out in a Zoom virtual meeting world, to figure out the exact kind of like framing of your picture so that you don't show the chaos that is of everything kind of
Yeah.
behind you. You have to be able to communicate. So the third skill is you have to be able to communicate, to articulate your ideas in a way that other people understand, as well as to understand them, to be able to send the right email that gets a response, to pick the perfect emoji to send in the group chat so that people know that you're kind of joking and that it's sarcasm, that they're not upset with
Hmm.
you, or etc. The fourth skill is you have to be able to connect. This is emotional intelligence and empathy and building strong rapport and relationships with people. And then the fifth skill, the last skill, is you have to be able to lead, to influence people to some type of common goal. And this leadership in this component isn't necessarily, oh, I am a senior leader and I have a job title like CEO or manager, but more at any level of the organization that you want to influence or motivate other people.
Okay. And maybe that's even more important when you don't have the positional power to be able
Mhm.
to influence and lead others when you need help, assistance, buy-in. So
Exactly. Yeah. Because people can't do things because you told them to as their manager, but you're the project manager or you're an intern at a company or
right.
whatever. You're just in that situation where it's like, okay, I've got to motivate these people by something other than saying you have to do this.
Yeah. We're going to take a break shortly, though. Before we do, Drew, do you have an example from one of those 5 areas of from one of your clients?
Sure. Yeah. So in terms of helping people, for one great example, so we, like I mentioned, we did some work with the Red Cross, and so in that, in this particular instance, they were presenting to a bunch of teenagers, high school students,
Yeah.
and they wanted to have an understanding of like, okay, how do we train them in geoengineering? We want to explain some complex stuff around what we can do around climate change to reduce it. And so the person we were working with, a great guy named Pablo Suarez, was talking about putting sulfur in the air, which is akin to putting a bunch of little tiny umbrellas in the atmosphere, and that would reduce the overall amount of sunlight we are hitting. So it's an example of geoengineering. So when they were doing that, I was like, oh, while you're communicating that, you should make a reference to Mary Poppins. And Pablo was like, that's stupid. He's like, first of all, these are high school students. I don't even know if they will remember Mary Poppins. This was before the new movie came out.
Revival.
And he's like, exactly. And it's like, second of all, I don't like the movie Mary Poppins. And I was like, okay, well, that's blasphemy. It's an amazing movie. But I was like, I think it'll work. It'll get people to lean in a little bit more. And he's a scientist, which is great. So he was like, all right, let's test it. Right, let's prove it. So we set up cameras for this in-person event. We tracked everyone's, like, we recorded the audience, and then we put that audience through MIT Mood Lab, so we could actually see what was their engagement, what mood were they in.
Yeah.
And when he got to the Mary Poppins thing, there was an increase in engagement and increase in excitement and all of that, and we could actually scientifically prove that it was a nice peak in that particular thing. And it was just a simple way of connecting a complex idea with something people really enjoy that got them to lean in a little bit more.
Sweet. That's a great example. And you must have felt pretty satisfied.
I did. I was like, yes, the data proves
Mary
it.
came through. So we're going to take a break now. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about some of the dangers of using humor and how to develop your own humor. Now, if you want to find out more about Drew, check out his website, humorthatworks.com, or you can find him on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Drew Tarvin. And for sure, if you're listening and you want to call us and talk to us live, that number is going to be 1-866-472-5790. You're listening to Partner Up with Amy Carroll on the Voice America Business Channel. Welcome back to Partner Up with Amy Carroll. I'm here with Drew Tarvin, a self-proclaimed humor engineer, talking about the power of humor. Before the break, we discussed some of the many benefits of humor, both in our personal lives and professional lives. Though people like any good news, there's always some bad news. So now we're going to visit the dark side. So Drew, talk to me about some of the dangers of using humor and hopefully how to avoid them.
Yes, well, so you're exactly right, because humor is simply a tool, right? In fact, we kind of equate humor to kind of being like a screwdriver, because you can use a screwdriver to build something up. You use a screwdriver to take something down. It often involves a little bit of a twist, just like humor does. And technically, though it is a screwdriver meant to be hopefully pretty positive, you could try to stab someone with it. Right. So there are some dangers of humor, namely that humor can be used to create in and out groups, to actually create separations between people. It can be used to disparage people, to like kind of really knock them down, to punch downwards. And it can be a distraction, right? If it's used inappropriate, it's kind of like, here's the distraction, and you're taking away from importance from something that is really actually important. And the way that we can avoid it, I think, is sometimes it's helpful to know why humor is inappropriate. And humor tends to be inappropriate for one of 3 reasons. First of all, it has an inappropriate topic, right? Like humor is not an excuse to then talk about something that you would not otherwise normally talk about in that context. Like if you're in the workplace, it's not like, I have this really funny racist joke. And you're like, yeah, but it's racist. And you're like, yeah, I know, but it's really funny. It's like, well, no, it's not appropriate.
Right.
So making sure that you have the right topic, making sure that it's not something inappropriate. The second reason why humor is inappropriate, it tends to be because it has an inappropriate target. So humor does, oftentimes have someone that you are kind of something that you are poking fun at. And so it depends on what that target is. If it's just something about life, that's usually pretty good. If it's about an individual person and their characteristics or their, personality or whatever, not appropriate, again, for the workplace. And then finally, it could come at an inappropriate time. So recognize that humor is incredibly valuable in a lot of situations, but not every situation, right?
Yeah.
Like if you've just fired someone, it's not a time to like bust out your Frozen parody and be like, I've got to let you go. You're not going to work here anymore. Like, it's like, that's not the time. That's,
Okay, that's a
terrible
really good
thing.
point.
So
Bad
yeah,
timing.
those tends to be the three things. And the way that, so that's helpful, I think, sometimes for people to recognize, okay, making sure a sense check, is this humor I'm about to use any one of those three? Is it an appropriate topic? Is it an appropriate target? Is it an appropriate time? And the
Target,
easiest,
topic, time. Okay.
and yep, 3 T's. And the easiest way I think to think about it or to stay safe about it is what we call the newspaper rule, or maybe in today's environment, maybe what we call the woke Twitter rule. And that is to say, would you be comfortable with whatever it is that you did as a humor instance showing up on the front page of your hometown newspaper or getting blasted all over social media?
Yeah.
And if you're like, I don't know if I'd want everyone in the world to hear this joke that I told this person at the workplace, then probably not appropriate for work.
Oh, that is so user friendly and so crystal clear. That's great. And if you can't remember topic, time, target, then
Mhm.
you use the Twitter woke rule.
Yeah, the woke Twitter rule.
The woke
Exactly.
Twitter
And I
rule.
think that, and I think it's helpful for people to recognize that there is a difference between humor that you use with your friends
Yeah.
or that you would do if you're a stand-up comedian, and humor that you would use to be appropriate in the workplace. And so
Yeah.
the types of training and what we're doing is we're not training people so that they become stand-up comedians and have a Netflix special, or we're not teaching them improv so that they go on to Whose Line Is It Anyway?
Right.
We're teaching them as skills so that they can solve challenges in the workplace. And so that means that the context as well as the type of humor that you're going to use is going to be a little bit different than maybe what you're used to seeing on the like stand-up comedy screen.
I love that because that takes a lot of, I hope as listeners are hearing that, that takes a lot of pressure off them because I think they don't realize how much more readily available this idea of humor is than it is. I don't know,
Yeah.
because they're having that assumption it's about the stand up. As you were talking about the dangers of humor, I had a couple of thoughts flash into my mind. One was notoriously where I get myself in trouble is with sarcasm with strangers. And then sometimes I do sarcasm with strangers in French. And that's just a whole nother level of really, really, a disaster waiting to happen. So I remember I had been in the US for a couple of weeks. And always, I've never learned to travel light. I've got a suitcase that is as big as I am and weighs about as much as I do. And had been flying back, and of course I had jet lag and I was a bit woozy, and I was on the train and I dragged my suitcase to the exit area and I was just about to get off the train. And a man he got in line behind me, so he was standing right behind me, and I just thought it was the most clever, funny, engaging thing. I turned to him and I said to him in French, "Oh, just in time," meaning just in time to help me with my suitcase off the train. And I thought, "Oh, Amy, God, you are so charming and playful. I can barely stand it." Oh, Drew, his response, you would think I had just like tossed his dog out the window or something. He blew up at me, and luckily my French is bad enough that I didn't quite understand everything he said. Though all I know was he was so incensed that I would think that it was acceptable that I would make this comment that implying that he should help me get my suitcase off the train. I mean, I was like shaken up, and this happened a couple of years ago, and I can still remember it, you know?
Mhm.
So, that was a sad day for me.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, one, sarcasm is particularly challenging sometimes because it's all in the delivery and it's sometimes the relationship and every, the balance of it. And then sometimes you're catching someone who doesn't pick up on the humor. And that is one of the things that people are sometimes worried about is like, what if it doesn't land, or what if it's awkward, or what if, all of these different scenarios. And one, it becomes a funny moment a little bit later as that
Right.
time passes. Right, you can tell that
Uh,
story.
yeah.
Uh, but I think the other thing is, and this is in the workplace, we typically don't spend a lot of time on teaching people how to use sarcasm because it's so cultural and because it's technically a negative form of humor,
Right.
which can be good for building relationships, but it is a negative form. And so if you keep your humor more positive and inclusive, the nice thing is that even if people don't pick up on it as a joke, if it's positive inclusive, then the positive inclusive joke just becomes a positive inclusive statement.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So let's jump into that more, because I know you and I both have some great advice for listeners how they can develop their own sense of humor. So
Mhm.
let's start with I think you have three things for people to pay attention to.
Yep, exactly like how we took apart, kind of work and put it together again. I did the same thing kind of with understanding what is this skill of humor? Because I do believe humor is a skill, which means it can be learned, right? So if it is a skill, what are the components or what are the practices of the skill? And for me, I think it's three things. It's first your sense of humor. And that is simply, what do you find interesting? What makes you laugh? What's your perspective, right? So your perspective, Amy, on how you see the world and what's curious to you is going to be very different than what I see. So that is a sense of humor, and I think one of the best ways to develop your sense of humor, what comedians do, is they all keep a humor notebook,
Mm-hmm.
and that is simply a repository, a spot where you can go and anytime something comes up and you're like, "Huh, that's kind of interesting," or "Why is this like that?" or "I was on the train and this guy did not get my joke. This crazy story happened." Right? It goes down into your humor notebook, and that allows you to one. It starts to change how you see the world, right? I
Yep.
don't think that funny things happen to funny people. I just think that funny people see the things that happen to them in a funny way, right? So it changes your perspective and you start to notice just how many opportunities there are for humor in the world at large.
Yeah. And I think that practice makes more funny things appear to you
Mhm.
just by putting focus and awareness on it.
Absolutely. I completely agree. So that's your sense of humor. That's step number one, is your sense of
Mm.
humor. The second is your ability to humor. This is the ability to take that interesting kind of thought that like, huh, why is it like that? And turn it into something comedic, turn it into something that other people can resonate with, that they can enjoy. This is kind of a combination of the content that you write, how you explore that concept, and then how you deliver it, right? The performance component of it. And
Mm-hmm.
so the content generation is from UCB, so an improv school based in New York and LA. They teach yes and as a specific application of what they say is, if this is true, what else is true? Or what else could be true. So you have that interesting idea, that observation, or this like, oh man, sarcasm's got me into some sticky situations sometimes. If that's true, what else is true, or what else could be true?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So then you can play with it of like, okay, that's a real instance on the train. You can say, I decided to stop using sarcasm a little bit because I imagined all the places that it could go wrong. And then you can kind of fabricate or come up with funny other examples of like, oh, I could get in front of a judge and be sarcastic and get, locked in jail. Or I could be
Did my
like,
brother Joe tell you the story about the driving thing, about the
no,
judge?
are there more?
Apparently, I blocked it out. I was so sarcastic as a teenager with a judge that the fine he wasn't going to give me, he decided to give me. Yeah. So yeah, you would think I would have learned about sarcasm then. Apparently not.
Right, exactly. So that's you kind of building this content, this one concept a little bit further. And then there's the delivery component of it. Are you confident when you're presenting? Are you leaving enough pause for people to kind of laugh or at least register the humor that you're using, right? Some more specific techniques, but that's all of the ability to humor, right? So you have
Mm-hmm.
sense of humor, the ability to humor, and then finally you have agency with humor. And this is using humor to achieve a specific result. Say I want to use humor in an email so that people read it more, or more likely to read it. Or I want to use humor in this meeting so that I build stronger connections. Or I want to use humor in this presentation so that people actually remember my ideas a little bit better. So you have that specific result. And what's interesting about the agency with humor is you don't even have to always be the creator of humor. You can sometimes be a humor curator.
Yes.
Right? You can say, oh, this quotation is really funny, really well said, and it makes a point for me. Like when I'm talking about humor and I talk about self-enhancing humor, I say, as Kurt Vonnegut said, laughter and tears are both responses to frustration. I myself prefer to laugh because there's less cleaning up to do afterwards. I think it's a great quotation. I'm referencing someone, like that's someone else creating that humor. I'm still giving credit, and I'm not like violating copyright rules, but I'm leveraging it to achieve this point that I want to make.
You just made me realize that I have a WhatsApp buddy who is a humor curator. He is constantly sending me videos and cartoons, and much of it is COVID related at the moment. Some of it's political on top of it. And I think of this guy as absolutely hilarious. And he's just using what's there. And so that's a great example that you get brownie points, and as far as humor credit for being seen as funny and the impact of connecting with people and all of those benefits that you talked about earlier.
Exactly. And everyone has their own kind of personal style that I think that comes a little bit more naturally. And so if you're really good at that curation, we call you, like, as in terms of a style, as a curator. You're the person who like can pick the perfect GIF in the group chat to make people laugh, or the funny quote that's going to happen, or you send the right cat video to that one friend of yours that's stressed out at that particular time. That's a great curator. If you're really good at this sense of humor stuff, if you're constantly kind of seeing the funny stuff in the world around you and you're kind of making note of it or exploring it, then you tend to be a really good writer or creator, what we call a creator, in the sense that you can take something just from out the world and pluck it out and be like, here's this interesting thought. And maybe that's a Twitter, like a tweet that you share out, or maybe it's actually a funny joke that you write, or more humor piece, right? If you're David Sedaris. Or if you're really good at the ability piece, that creation piece, we call you the performer. You're someone who is maybe good at improv or other things, or an actor where you can take other people's material and your delivery is just really good with it. And so when we're teaching people, it's not to say, oh, you have to learn all of these things. It can be helpful, but think about what is your unique style and just kind of amp it up and be a little bit more intentional about doing it.
Yeah. So you can tackle it from different directions. So here's what I want to do. I want to share some of the things I've learned about developing my own sense of humor. And then let's go back. If you have a story or an example where we can, you can share it so we can pull it apart and see where your 3 points apply and where maybe some of the stuff that I'll be talking about applies. So this comes from an article I wrote, and you can find it on my website, the ROI of humor. And I talk about my funny formula. And I realized that, so a couple of years ago, I analyzed how I developed my humor, because neither my mother or my father, would anyone can particularly label them as funny, haha, in any stretch of the imagination. And yet all of my siblings and I, there's almost this sense of positive competition between us about who can be funnier. And so what I think happens in my brain is I'll just pay attention to any daily event. And so it could be someone who's made a comment. It could be observing children playing. It could be missing a train or a tram or a bus, anything. And then my brain leaps into search mode and it scans this checklist for anything that's related to the event, however simple or mundane. And so I'll often ask myself, and this is almost happening unconsciously, Drew, I think, what is this similar to? What is this different from? What is it opposite of? And then from there, I have another checklist of types of humor. Now, you've named some of them, and one of them comes from improvisational theater, which is reincorporation. It is amazing how an audience will just eat it up when somebody has said something at the beginning of a scene or a beginning of a show, and then you weave it in at the end and they just burst out with laughter because they think you're the cleverest person in the world. And it's just because as an improviser, we've learned to be present, to pay attention, make the connections. And so it's like, for me, I think of reincorporation like a free joke. I didn't even have to come up with it on my own. Another, and you talked about sarcastic humor and the opposite of that, the or one-upmanship, and I call the opposite of that positive humor. Now, sarcasm can sometimes, the cool thing is, can be delivered positively. And I think of a positive one-upmanship I observed many years ago. I was working at this hotel school, and an Irish couple who worked there was having lunch by themselves. And I admit, I was eavesdropping on their conversation. And the man said to the woman, "Oh, darling, you are so funny." And she said, "Oh, my love, no, you are funny." And, no, it wasn't funny. I got confused. It was just, "You're the best." "Oh, my love, you're the best." "Oh, no, darling, you're the best." "Oh, love of my life, you are just amazing." "Oh, my dear, you are the most extraordinary person." And of course, they're doing it with a beautiful Irish accent, which doesn't hurt. And they're doing this one-upmanship about how the other person is more amazing than them, which it's friggin' simple. And yet it was all I could do not to, laugh out loud and give it in a way that I was eavesdropping. And it was incredibly joyous as well. So that is a great example to me of using both one-upmanship with a positive twist and the sarcasm. Another thing you mentioned was about self-deprecating humor. And you do this with abandon. And I love how you do it. And one of the things when I'm coaching people is you got to be a pretty confident person to do that, because you don't want to use it as a way for people to feel sorry for you, or, it's an important balance not to overuse it, because people can start to feel uncomfortable with that. And I think you've got a great balance for that. And then there's, for me, physical humor. Ellen DeGeneres is a great example of a comedian who uses physical humor. And I remember a couple of months ago, I was part of an improv show, except it's more like we had separate events. We all had they were all a group of different performers. So I was sitting innocently watching when one of the women on stage pointed to me, from the side, and was like, "Amy, get on stage." And I'm thinking, and I was kind of freaking out because I didn't know what the scene was about. I didn't know what to do. So I said, "Amy, support your co-actor." So I walked up on stage and I didn't dare open my mouth. So I just calmly smiled and made all sorts of movements with my face and my body that people started laughing. And I thought, wow, that's friggin' easy, so. And then another thing, we're starting to run out of time, though I'm going to start to talk faster, I think. Word games, puns, play on words. You're great at that. And one of the things my brother Kevin does is he lives his dream. He creates games. And he's been doing this since I was a kid. He's 8 years older than me, and he would be driving the car. He's like, "Okay, all right, listen up, everybody. 2 points for the singer and 1 point for the name of the song. And whoever gets, the most points gets to control the radio." So he would have these great ways to keep us very entertained.
And I think that, all of those examples I just want to briefly say is like, there's a great logic to it. And I strongly encourage, as Amy mentioned, the ROI of humor on her website, the blog post, is fantastic. It's a well thought out, and it's a great kind of logical approach. Because what's interesting is people don't realize that there can be a lot of logic to this. It doesn't have to be. There's some people who are very good at humor conversationally. They're more the performers, and they don't necessarily need the okay, do I need to think about, is this a redirection or a reincorporation or whatever? But for others of us, people like me, I love this kind of this separation. You're exactly right that they have these different types of styles, and you can just learn or practice one of them. You can say, okay, let me start with, can I do reincorporation a little bit more? Or can I do some more physical humor? Which one am I more naturally drawn to? And so I think it's just a great articulation of some of these styles people have.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Drew. And it looks like we're running out of time. I won't have time to tell that juicy story. I'll have to find another excuse to tell that another time for listeners. Now, Drew, you had one call for action, though you have another call for action. I would love for you to share that with the listeners.
Sure. So we think of this skill of humor, like we said, there's a lot that you can learn. You can learn these individual techniques, but we encourage you to start simply with trying to drive for 1 smile per hour. Try to think of one thing that you can do each hour of the day that brings a smile to your face or the face of someone else. And what you'll start to do is you'll develop a humor habit, and you'll start to notice just how simple it can be to add a little bit more humor with intentionality to your life.
Nice. And from my side, my call for action, if you have not been one of the 8 million people who've watched Drew's TEDx talk, be sure to check it out. You can search for Andrew Tarvin on YouTube, and you can check out his book and his website, humorthatworks.com. And the last call for action I have for you is feel free to send me your communication conundrums, clashes, challenges, mishaps, and blunders, or even more so, your successes, either via email or social media. I'll be reading them and discussing them on future shows. You can find me at amy@carrollcoaching.com. And Drew, is there in 15 seconds anything else that you want to mention, interesting things coming up?
Interesting thing coming up. We're doing a bunch of virtual programs, including a free virtual open mic. So if people want to get involved and learn how to practice their humor skill, find out more at humorthatworks.com.
Super cool. And from my side, if you want to take your superhero partner powers into the next decade, then join me on one of my online leadership presence courses. You can find out more about that at carrollcoaching.com. Now, Drew, thank you. This has been just a lovely conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And if I have a chance, I'm going to be on doing a Facebook Live, so you guys can hop over in 5 minutes past the hour, and I'll be chatting about today's show. You've been listening to Partner Up with Amy Carroll on the Voice America Business Channel. Thanks for listening, everyone, and happy partnering.